What up, everybody? It's Chris Orozco with Operation Moksha, and today I'm talking about self-care. I'm going to talk about what it is and what it isn't, and the main distinction to tell you whether or not you're actually doing self-care or if you're doing some other thing. Because a lot of people ask me what self-care is. A lot of my clients will be like, yo, I'm going to do this. Is this self-care? And then I see a lot of other coaches and talky head type people talking about what is self-care and what isn't. And there seems to be this growing dichotomy between people that think that self-care is like all bubble baths and like eating shit food, and other people seem to think it's all this other stuff. And so I wanted to put my own spin on it because there's one distinction in particular that I think will be really helpful to help you figure out whether or not what you're doing is self-care and help you orient yourself around what really good self-care practices would be and a good philosophy on self-care in general. So the number one thing about self-care is to treat yourself as someone you care about. That's the really number one thing. Because self-care could be a lot of different things for a lot of different people at a lot of different times, depending on a lot of different circumstances and situations and all sorts of shit. So self-care is ultimately about, do you care enough about yourself at any given moment to feel into what you genuinely need in that moment and give it to yourself? It is a living relationship that you have with yourself. Do you listen to yourself? Do you care enough about yourself to listen to what your problems are and what your concerns are and why you might be feeling off and what you might need at that moment? And if you actually do listen to what you're thinking and feeling and what you actually need at that moment, do you care enough to give it to yourself? Do you care enough to live that way all the time? Do you care enough to develop your capacity to live in that way more and more each day? Do you care enough about yourself to tell the truth about what you want? Do you care about yourself enough to tell the truth about what you don't want? Do you care about yourself enough to have boundaries? Do you care enough to have standards, which are very different than boundaries? Standards are saying, this is like any lower than this, I'm not willing to handle this. And then boundaries are basically saying like anything more than this and I can't have that. So do you care enough to actually live a life in alignment with who you are and what you need? Do you take time? Do you take breaks when you need it? Or do you push through because, getting stuff done is more important than, actually caring for yourself? Do you care about yourself enough to do challenging things that make you grow? Do you care enough about yourself to take care of your environment? Is your room clean? Is your house clean? Is your relationships clean? Is all these different things clean? Like, this is what self-care is, because your environment has an impact on your psychology. Your relationships have an impact on your psychology. Your own practices, your own mind, your food, all that sorts of shit has an impact on your psychology and has an impact on your well-being, and it has an impact on everything that makes you you. So if you don't have the baseline fundamental perception that you are someone worth caring about and that you are the person who is designated to care about you, then it's going to be really difficult to do self-care. You might take all the baths, you might, buy a bunch of crystals and do God knows what with them. But if the underlying fundamental relationship between you and yourself is not someone who is cared for and someone who is doing the caring for, if that's not the relationship, then self-care is going to be really difficult because you won't be able to identify it. Because you can't identify self-care if you don't have that kind of relationship with yourself to tell what you need at any given moment. It's not something that can just be prescribed. Like, you don't just need a nap and you don't just need blah, 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 blah. You're going to need different things at different times. And another very common misconception about self-care is that it's always taking time off. And that's not necessarily the case. Self-care might mean pushing yourself harder, because a lot of times depression and anxiety come from the downward spiral of not doing the things that challenge us and fulfill us. So if you're tired, if you're depressed, if you're feeling insecure, all these different things, you might need to do more to get yourself out of it. Going to the gym when you feel like shit is self-care. And other times, staying home when you really need to rest and care for yourself is self-care. It's about being able to feel into any given moment and tell what you really need. Like, a part of my daily practice is a cold shower. I consider that self-care. Some days it's more caring for me to realize that I've pushed myself really far outside of my comfort zone. I'm really raw. I'm really vulnerable. And actually some nice warm water on my body would be much better for me than putting myself outside the comfort zone and facing my resistance first thing in the morning. The same practice can be self-care or self-harm depending on the position you're in at any given moment and what you actually need in that moment. So self-care is not a prescription. Self-care is not something that you just do and it's done. It's a living, breathing relationship that you have with yourself that is based on listening to your fears, listening to your concerns, listening to every part of your personality, and caring about what they say, and caring enough to do something about when you discover a new need, or when you discover a new desire, when you discover a new fear or a concern or a boundary that's been violated or a standard that hasn't been met. It's about caring enough to do something about that. It's a fundamental relationship with yourself. And the practices and the behaviors and the communication styles, all those things stem from that relationship, because you end up treating yourself as someone who cares. And it's a touch and go thing, you know, because a lot of times we're trained to not care about ourselves. So, you know, it's like, you know, a few steps forward, maybe one step back for a little while, but the only thing that really matters is if you're forming that relationship. Do you trust yourself to care? Do you trust yourself to listen? Do you trust yourself to be there for yourself? Do you trust yourself to be a good friend to yourself? You know, like, that's really all it comes down to. And that's really all I wanted to say. So today's video is going to be pretty short. Just check if you genuinely give a fuck about yourself. And if you don't, then accept the fact that you currently don't. And get curious about what might have happened to you at any point of your life, and what thought processes might be making it so that you don't care about yourself. And what that might actually be trying to serve, so that you can actually change the relationship. And I guess I'll go into this a little bit more, since this is a shorter video than normal. So if you find self-care really difficult, it's likely because some part of you sees it as a threat, right? You're like, you know, if I really cared about myself, then blah, 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 blah. Like for me, the big thing that stopped me from doing it was like, wow, if I start caring for myself, then that's like all I'm going to do. That's going to become a full-time job, and I won't be able to do anything else ever again. And the odd thing about it is that was true. But that's what made my life better. My whole life is just one big series of self-care. This is self-care. This is me talking about a thing that I love talking about, because it's going to make the world a better place, and I'll have a sense of satisfaction, and maybe I'll get a new client out of it and make money and get to live the lifestyle that I want to live. All while at my fucking house doing whatever I feel like doing. I just woke up from a nap, which was also self-care. So it's like, if some part of you doesn't want to do it, you probably see it as a threat, either a threat to your livelihood, or a threat to your security, or a threat to your relationships, or something like that. You have to identify whatever you see as threatening about caring for yourself. Either, you know, it might consume your whole life and you might not have fun anymore, or if you start caring for yourself, then, you know, people might leave you, or if you start caring for yourself and start getting things that you want, then you might, you know, be in danger of losing them. And there's all sorts of reasons to be afraid of caring for yourself. And yours are going to be different than a lot of other people's. They might be, you know, entirely unique to you. So you, again, in order to figure out what self-care is for you, you have to really get into a relationship with yourself. And then in order to understand why you might be avoiding self-care, again, you have to get into a relationship with yourself. So all of this is about having a relationship with yourself, of understanding where you're coming from, what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, and ultimately how you can care for yourself in healthier ways, in the unconscious ways that you programmed when you were probably like a fucking child. So if you want help with this, please let me know. I'm bringing on free clients right now, and so I didn't mean to say that. I'm bringing on clients right now, and I'm having free conversations, is what I meant to say. So if you're interested in some coaching and you think that you could either up-level your self-care, you want to find your sense of life purpose, you want to master your relationship with your emotions and just have a more happy and satisfying experience of living, then I'm your guy. Hit me up. We can talk about all that shit for free. I'll help you come up with a plan to get you from where you are to where you want to go. Even if you never give me any money, even if you never sign with me, I'll help you figure out a really solid plan for how to get you from point A to point B, so that if you don't hire me, you still know where to go and what to do with your life. So I love you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions, if there's any topics you want me to cover, if you think I left anything out, or if you think I'm entirely full of shit. Let me know. I love you. Bye-bye. It's going to be awkward while I push the button.